You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Well, hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode 109 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. On this episode, I have two stories for you about word thieves and cranky clowns. But first, let's get comfortable with a little bit of bourbon. Fill up your glasses, y'all, and let's say cheers. Well, all right. That'll wake you up. Today, I am drinking Michter's small batch bourbon. It's been more than a year since I had Michter's, and I thought I'd revisit it since I hear from so many of y'all who are looking for kind of a different bourbon, something middle shelf-like. You know, you're tired of makers, you want to experiment, but you're still trying to figure out your way through this whole crazy bourbon thing. Michter's is a good way to go. It is sweet and fruity, with a little bit of a bitter orange sort of flavor to it. Definitely cinnamon, and then a little bit of oak. It is ridiculously easy to drink. It has sort of a medium body, not especially oily, but not too thin either. So for me, I don't think it really needs ice. It's only 91 proof, so there's not a whole lot of burn to it. It's just sweet and smooth and a really nice sipping bourbon. And it is doing exactly what it should right now, y'all, because I could use a little bit of mellowing out. You see, I've been a little ornery lately. Not too long ago, I was invited to something. And there are few things worse to me than an unwanted invitation. I'll tell you, nothing ever good happens when my phone rings. My friends know me well enough to just not call me at all. But one day, I saw my girlfriend on the ID, and I thought, oh no, this is not going to end well for any of us. She wanted to invite me to join a local writers group. The thought of that just made me want to curl up and twitch. For those of you who've been listening to me long enough, you know that I am not a joiner. I just don't do well in group settings. But my girlfriend is very well-intentioned and very thoughtful, so she was a little hurt when my initial response was something between a snort and a cackle. Because I don't do well in groups, but I do really, really awful with other writers. And this isn't going to endear me to anyone. I do understand that. I think Ernest Hemingway, who is, by the way, my literary hero, he and I kind of share the same thoughts on other writers. And when I say other writers, let me be clear. I mean most anyone and myself, because I know I am something of an asshole. And this entire opinion started way back in the 6th grade. Back then, writing was done on sheets of loose-leaf paper and in spiral-bound notebooks, usually in pencil, and for most of my classmates, only when it was required. But for me, I wrote often and incessantly. I had diary entries, short stories, sparkly poems about the seasons, long-winded responses to exam questions. And when I had some extra special stories to share, I got industrious, and I created a newspaper for my class. It wasn't so much of a newspaper as it was just a couple of haphazard pages. There were book reviews and horoscopes and a couple of blurbs about school events. So it wasn't exactly a masterpiece, but it was my own creation. It wasn't a regular publication. Mostly because to have it copied, my dad made me spend an hour or two stuffing envelopes at the family business in trade for the use of his copy machine. But every so often, my classmates would discover the latest edition tucked into their desks like a little love note. They would occasionally read the paper. Most would just crumple it into a ball and launch it into the trash bin. And this was my first lesson about being a writer. Most people don't read. But my next lesson, there is always someone who thinks they can do better. And by someone, I mean Mallory. She was a skinny blonde girl who always looked as though she was trying to dislodge a piece of food from between her teeth. Our friendship never really extended beyond casual interaction at places we both just happened to be, so there was no hatred, but no real interest either. Until the day she decided to release her own class newspaper. Where mine was mostly handwritten, hers was typed. Where mine had illustrations drawn by a friend, hers had real pictures. And do you want to know why? Mallory's favorite writing tools were scissors and a glue stick. Every single page of her newspaper was plagiarized from the recent issue of 17 magazine. And wouldn't you know it, my classmates, all of a sudden, they're fascinated in reading. They adored her photocopied regurgitation, and this kind of enraged me. And I'll be honest, y'all, it wasn't the competition that bothered me. It was the fact that every word my classmates were eating up had been stolen from someone else. And this is where things took a little bit of a nasty turn. Because every time I saw my humble but original newspaper with a footprint on it, or used as spitball fodder, I lost just a little bit more of my self-control. I mean, I didn't get it. Were my classmates just so stupid and gullible that they didn't realize they were being deceived? And what about Mallory? Where the hell was her integrity? And obviously now I know that in 6th grade, integrity really only extended about as far as the lunchroom, where you knew it was just plain wrong to try and pass an oatmeal raisin cookie off as chocolate chip. And hell, most of those kids still copied directly out of the encyclopedia. Still, I just didn't have it in me to let that little thief Mallory corner the newspaper market with lies. So I did what any budding writer would do. I kind of lost my shit. I launched a vicious smear campaign against Mallory and her word-thieving ways. It started with handmade buttons that I got all of my friends to wear that said, "I don't read stolen words." Now this got the class buzzing, not so much because they cared about what they were reading, but because everyone loves drama. So I decided to step things up. I made my attack personal. Now, I'm not entirely proud of this, y'all, but I'll tell you, it worked. I took a copy of 17 magazine, cut out all of the pages that Mallory had borrowed, and I posted them to the class bulletin board with the headline, "Hey, Mallory, if you don't steal gum, why would you steal words?" It was a little bit harsh, it really was. Teachers had to get involved. Mostly because my little blonde competitor went berserk when she saw everyone laughing at the board, and she ripped it all down in a blazing rage. Class newspapers, not surprisingly, were banned from that point on. Which brings me to this stupid writers group. I really did not want to go to the meeting. My friend described it as being something of a loose workshop, where people could bounce ideas off of each other and get feedback on areas where they might be stuck. It sounded like hell. But every so often, I think maybe I should get out of my dark little world and engage with people beyond my tightly regulated circle of misanthropes and demons. And I blame my guy for this. My considerate, thoughtful, genuinely helpful guy, who occasionally challenges my reserve with annoyingly sensible suggestions like, "Gee, maybe you should go." So I went. The meeting included a mix of men and women reading portions of essays or novels they were working on, and then fielding comments from the group. I offered a few simple suggestions when appropriate, but mostly kept my mouth shut. Until the queen bee stood up. She reminded me a little bit of Mallory, to be honest. Her longish blonde hair was pulled into a high ponytail, so tight that it appeared to raise her eyebrows an extra inch. She was the exact reason I despise groups like this. She'd spent the last 30 minutes wrapping pseudo-intellectual criticism around half-assed compliments. You know, she's the kind of person who says crap like, "Well, your prose lacks depth of character, but it has a nice flow." By the silence in the room when she stood up, it was clear she had, over time, somehow beaten this group into reverent submission. And she wasn't there to field criticism or comments. She was there to perform. She pulls a chapter out of her novel and presents it to us as though it were Shakespeare, turning her allotted 5 minutes into an easy 10. It was a command performance meant for the stage and not a too small room at the back of some shitty community library. But everyone applauds nonetheless when she finishes, and they barely offer a single word in criticism. Instead, they just throw all sorts of praise in her direction about her heartfelt writing as if she were the shining example of narrative genius. Which put me in an extremely awkward position. Because I have something to say. Y'all know I always have something to say. And oh, I wanted to say it so badly. But I also didn't want to make waves in a group that I've only just met, especially when it concerned someone that they really seem to revere. So I engage in a very heated internal debate while this group lathers the chick up. I'm thinking, maybe they know more about her than I do. And maybe they just preferred letting her have her few minutes in the spotlight rather than engaging with her. God, I didn't care. I knew what I had to say was not going to go over well at all. But I sucked it up and I interrupted anyway. I had to. I really, really did try my best to have my say as nicely as possible. But it's kind of hard to be delicate when it's clear that the so-called Queen Bee of Writing has lifted half of her dialogue from a Tennessee Williams play. It wasn't a well-known one, except maybe to me because I have a mind like a steel trap, and I worship Tennessee Williams, so I recognized every single line. The Queen Bee was the only one in the room to look surprised when I called her out, which kind of made me think that she's been adopting passages from better writers for quite some time. And this bunch of hacks had been letting her get away with it. Her face reddens, and she mutters something about revisiting the work, then sits back down in her seat and pouts. I have clearly irked her, and the room doesn't exactly know what to do about it. So there's some awkward conversation after that. But ultimately we carry on, and the tension eases. I'm thinking, maybe I've done the right thing. Eventually, it is my turn to share work with the group. But before I can reach for the paragraph that I have brought, before I can even breathe, that sulky queen bee looks up and says, she probably forgot to bring it, kind of like she forgot to put on pants today. The room snickers. I look down at my denim cut-off shorts, and now it's my turn to feel my face flush. I'm mortified. I am embarrassed. And I'm thinking, God damn it, how do I do anything now? Well, the queen bee is looking very pleased with herself for causing me discomfort, and I hate myself just a little bit for allowing that thieving bitch to get under my skin. It is so hard to organize the thoughts in my head. But somehow, in the back of my mind, I remember Mallory and our 6th grade newspaper war, and I realized that this chick has absolutely nothing on me, least of all integrity. So I stand up, dust my pride off a little bit, and I say, well, I may be wearing shorts, but at least they came from my own closet. And with that, I am raising up my glass and toasting to owning your words and making them count. Cheers, y'all. Whew. All right, that is some good bourbon. You know, it seems like there's a whole lot of drama all over the place these days, especially when it's concerning a certain scary movie. And I'm just going to put this right out there, y'all. There is absolutely nothing frightening about clowns. Oh yeah, I said it. Clowns are not scary. And I can say this with confidence because I dated one. Clowns have never really bothered me, not even as a kid. Of course, that could be because Bozo the Clown was something of a Chicago hero. His show, Bozo's Circus, was broadcast on a local channel starting in the 60s, and it kept running all the way into the millennium. To this day, Bozo still makes appearances at Chicago parades and events. That show, y'all, trumped everything in kid world. Forget about cartoons, forget donuts and cookies. The Bozo show was the only way to start your day. The show's big attraction was a game called Grand Prize Game Buckets. It involved tossing a ball into a series of buckets, and every bucket you made, you'd get a prize. So the further away the bucket, the bigger the prize. The only way to play the game was to be a member of the audience. So you can imagine, getting tickets to the Bozo show was a huge deal. So huge, in fact, that there was a waiting list of 5 years. 5 years is a long time to wait, but my mom said she put in my name for tickets. So in those 5 years, I became a fucking expert at tossing a ball into a bucket. Every day after school, I would come home and play a hobo version of Grand Prize buckets in my room with an assortment of my mom's Tupperware containers. Because I knew in the pit of my soul that one day I would be called into the ring to play. My friends started getting their tickets to the Bozo show around 6th and 7th grade, and I watched in envy even then as they all got to go to the live taping and have their shot to be called into the ring. And I'm thinking, any day now. Any day, we're going to get those tickets, and I'm going to go and be on Bozo's circus. Until, of course, my mom shattered all of my dreams by admitting that she had never really bought the tickets in the first place. Oh, the betrayal. My mom figured that I would lose interest in Bozo after a year or two. Yeah, she was a little wrong. So many, many years later, when a profile popped up on an internet dating site for a guy that I'll call Cranky, proudly stating his occupation as professional clown, it felt like destiny. Take that, Mom. I'll get my own damn clown. And I'm not using clown in a metaphorical sense. This guy was an authentic, wig-wearing, shoe-stomping, car-packing graduate of clown college. I loved the fact that he was so open about his profession. So many times, I'd find these guys on Match.com or wherever who would claim to be something vague, like a technician. And then we'd get 3 dates in, and I would come to find out that the only thing they were a technician of was the fryer at McDonald's. Not that there is anything wrong with that, I just hated the deception. Cranky could have easily called himself an actor, or said that he worked in the arts, but this guy was a proud clown. He'd done some time in a circus, and when he got tired of life on the road, started clowning for kids' birthday parties and events. He admitted that he had a very hard time getting dates, since so many women seemed to have hang-ups about clowns. They'd find pictures of him in his agent suit, that's what Cranky called his main clown costume, and then suddenly vanish from his life. I felt a little bad for Cranky at first, because after our first few dates, he really seemed like a regular guy. We did all the stuff that any normal couple does when they're getting to know each other. We went out for meals, we watched movies, exchanged funny emails, and he'd talk about his job the same way anyone who isn't a clown does. Unfortunately, our relationship never really went anywhere because it turned out Cranky the clown was also a dick. When the conversation rolled around to talking about our sexual pasts, Cranky got all judgy about mine. As I've told y'all, and as I told Cranky, I've dated some musicians. This did not sit well with Cranky. He'd rummage around through my CDs and assume if one was autographed, I must have had sex with someone in the band. Every time some hairband song played on the radio, he'd ask, "You didn't sleep with him, did you?" Cranky and I never did have sex, mostly because he acted as though kissing me was some sort of sick version of 6 degrees of separation. I couldn't tell if he was proud or disgusted by it. But it was when he started getting weird about my writing and asked to start coming along with me on interviews that I kicked that clown to the curb. I ended things with Cranky over the phone, which after 2 months of dating was admittedly kind of shitty of me. But I knew that he would immediately assume it was because of his profession. And I wasn't excited to have to tell him to his face that I thought he was a manipulative, controlling asshole. And here's the thing about breaking up with manipulative, controlling assholes. They don't take it very well. Cranky was pissed. He called me a few choice names and hung up on me, swearing that I wasn't worth the effort. But a couple of hours later, Cranky had a change of heart, and he called back looking for forgiveness. I had already filed his number under Do Not Answer, so within a week, I had collected about 20 voicemail messages from him that ranged from humble apologies to downright obsessive lust. I didn't really think too much of it. Breakups usually take a good 2 weeks or so to stick. But one night, Cranky showed up at my local bar. And that was unacceptable. No one invades my territory. I was sitting with a few of my girlfriends when I noticed him walking in, and I got that horrible sinking feeling you get when you know that shit is about to go down. My friends immediately wanted to leave, but I wasn't going to let a lovelorn clown ruin our night. So we kept talking and drinking and waiting for Cranky to finally grow the clown balls to confront me. He spent a good 30 minutes wandering around that bar trying to look inconspicuous. He knew that I knew he was there, but I suppose he didn't want to come off like too giant of a stalker. Which, in a warped sort of way, I appreciated. Not that I was afraid of the guy, because back then, I never left the house without packing. Oh, I didn't carry a gun, although I suppose I could have if I wanted. Instead, I had a stun gun. They were mostly legal in Illinois with a FOID card, and my dad had bought mine for me. It was cute, pink, powerful. I really didn't want to have to use it, but that would be up to the clown, of course. Cranky finally came up to our table, looking like the saddest shell of a clown you ever could imagine. And oh, the sob story he gave. He was so sorry and so lonely, and I suspect so deranged. Couldn't I give him one more chance? Nope. My girlfriends were all ready to pounce on the guy when he started to object. Clearly, Cranky was going to need something more persuasive than just a no to convince him to go away. There were a whole lot of ways this evening could have ended. My girlfriends could have gone all crazy and beaten the guy to a bloody pulp in the parking lot. I could have knocked him to the ground with my stun gun and watched him twitch in agony for a while. But these just seemed like really violent, angry sort of ways to end the night, and I didn't want that for myself or for Cranky. So I look around the bar. I want to have a little bit of fun with this. And I catch sight of a beer pong table in the way back. And then it struck me. I knew just how to get rid of Cranky. It was a huge risk. And let me just say this now in hindsight. It was a bad idea. A terrible idea. One that I would never, ever, ever recommend trying. But having said that, I will tell you that I looked at Cranky and I made him a deal. I said, I'll play you for it. Well, Cranky looks confused, and my girlfriends think I've lost my mind. And who knows, maybe I had. So I break down my proposition for Cranky. I say, you and I are going to play a slightly modified version of beer pong. If you win, I'll go on one more date with you. If I win, you will never call me, never come looking for me, never ever even say my name again. Cranky considers my offer. And as he does, I make it very clear that if he agrees, he will be playing by my rules. And if he doesn't like the outcome and tries anything, I will have no problem sending several million jolts of electricity through his cock. He could have just turned around and walked out of the bar at that point, which is what any sane person would have done. But Cranky the Clown loved a good game, and oh, did I have one for him. I had one of my girlfriends go over and sweet talk 6 empty buckets out of the bartender. They were typically used for beer specials and were sized just right for what I had in mind. I placed the 6 buckets in a line on the ground, doing my best to make sure that they were evenly spaced. My friend fills each with a glass of water to ensure that the ping pong ball wouldn't bounce out. You see, this wasn't going to be a drinking game. This was a high-stakes game of skill. Unbeknownst to Cranky, that I had been preparing for my entire life. We were going to play grand prize buckets. The rules were simple. The person to sequentially make the furthest bucket wins. Miss a bucket, you lose. No do-overs, no best of 3. This wasn't exactly how I had hoped to play grand prize buckets in my lifetime. And sadly, there were no Schwinn bicycles to be won at the end of the row. But I was ready to play nonetheless, and I handed Cranky the ball to make his first shot. We both easily sunk the first 2 buckets. On the Bozo show, it was always the third bucket that would trip the players up. They'd just barely skim the side of the bucket and be sent home with a coloring book and a board game. But damn it, Cranky made that bucket far too easily for my liking. I started to sweat just a little bit. And I started to wonder if maybe I had made a horrible mistake and should have just had the bouncer toss him out in the first place. I mean, what kind of idiot challenges a fucking clown to essentially what is a child's birthday party game? Me, apparently. And it had been quite some time since I'd played Bozo Buckets. So honestly, my third toss was a bit wonky. I made it, but just barely. Cranky is looking confident as he lines up his 4th shot. And damn if that stupid clown didn't make it. I can see my girlfriends visibly tense as I take my place in front of the buckets. That 4th bucket seemed miles away. Just breathe, I tell myself. You got this. You can do it. So I try to block out all of the sounds in the bar. I try to erase the eager expression that Cranky has on his face. Instead, I just picture myself back in my home bedroom, an audience of stuffed animals and dolls watching. I take a deep breath, and I feel myself relax. I let that ping pong ball glide out of my hand, and I nail it. Now it's Cranky's turn to look nervous. He takes a swig of beer, grabs the ball, and eyes his shot. On the Bozo show, if a kid made the 5th bucket, she almost always made the 6th. And I shudder slightly when I realized that we hadn't set terms for what to do in the case of a tie. Would we have to pull out a 7th bucket? This game could go on all night, or God forbid I could lose. And y'all, I am the world's worst loser even when there are no stakes involved. So the thought of conceding to this clown was horrifying. I started to curse myself for being so stupidly confident. I cursed Cranky for being a dick. But mostly, I cursed my mother for not having bought me tickets to the damn Bozo show in the first place. I could barely watch as Cranky tosses the ball. It feels as though the shot is happening in slow motion. I see the ball sailing through the air, and as it descends toward the bucket, I think, fuck, he's got this. Anything could have played into what happened next. Perhaps Cranky's fingers were wet from his beer bottle. Maybe someone opened a door in the back. All I know is that ping pong ball clipped the side of the bucket with a loud clink and then bounced across the room. My friends all start shrieking at once. I throw my hands in the air in victory, and we all start jumping around like we've actually won something and not just publicly humiliated some guy in the world's most uncomfortable dating game ever played. To Cranky's credit, he ingested whatever crazy he may have had, waved goodbye, and ducked out a side door. As wagered, I never heard from him again. As for me, I was proud to have done so well at my first and only game of Grand Prize Buckets. But I will leave y'all with one bit of advice. Don't fear the clown. Fear the person. I think I'm going to go pour myself another glass. Hope y'all have enjoyed this episode of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you can find me on Twitter. I am at Morning Neurosis. Feel free to send me any of your bourbon suggestions, or if you've got any questions about the show, I'll be happy to answer them. Hope y'all have a great week. I will be back next Sunday to share more of my crazy bourbon-soaked adventures. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablerant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter at Morning Neurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweet as taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You